Hello, good morning, everybody. Uh, my name is Joseph Professor Pratamajaya and my partner Susana Morning. Well, today our group gonna describe or present you about the chapter from the book given that related to the acquisition of a second language. Well, the chapter is about cross-linguistic influence and learner language. But here, we are especially talking about theory or some kind of second language acquisition. It means the process or the theory. Well, one of the theory of acquisition of a second language is the constructive analysis hypothesis. The term constructive analysis hypothesis, or commonly known as GAA, is very well known terminology in the 20th century. Constructive analysis hypothesis that starts from the stack of the comparative and constructive data is in the language, which ultimately produce this term constructive analysis hypothesis. Constructive analysis hypothesis is an approach to behavior and structuralism at a time in the context of acquiring or acquisition of a second language. This term claimed that the main difficulty of acquiring or acquisition of a second language is being too fanatical about the first language. Structural analysis of the two languages produce a linguistic contrast taxonomy that make easier for experts and teachers to identify the difficulties in students. Behaviorism based on every human behavior, where language learning can be easily formed there. Learning theory also highlights the absence of distraction and difficulties in learning language. Therefore, this theory tries to unify or the first language and the second or the target language. There are some experts that try to describe about the process of difficulty of the acquisition of the second language in the context of English language for students. But all opinions point to the dialect of the language and the rules of grammar itself. It means that for a process maximizing the second language in the context of English language. According to the view of Stockwell, there are some possible degree in difficulty in the context of phonology system in a contrast that commonly known as hierarchy of difficulty. Those are level 1, coalescence. It means the unification of the first language in the second language or target one. And level 2, under differentiation. It means element in the first language, no effect in the target one. And level 3, reinterpretation. There end contribution to the first language from the target one. And level 4, over differentiation. It means there and a similar element of the both. It means first language and the second or the target language. And level 5 split, it means one element in the first language become more in the target language. And then from constructive analysis hypothesis to CLI. There are many dynamics in mastery of a second language in terms of phonetics, phonology, and grammatical differences. According to the version of tales or legends of linguists, point out the difficulty of constructive analysis. The first, Ronald Waddell, which know well as strong version. Ronald Vargaup said that predicting language difficulties to require linguists to formulate language in general. In this case, it can be handled syntax, phonology, semantic in the context of how to combine the two languages. But he trusts that teachers and linguists absolutely completely apply this. And the next linguist is Clermont and France. Uh, the weak version of constructive analysis hypothesis reminds of GLA that is very important to pay attention to the previous important role. He emphasized syntax, lexical, and semantic intervention which show variation among students, and also grammatical order categories such as words, tense have uh, invite variation. There are more many experts point out their point of view at a time, and most of them say that the most problems were on the syntax and semantics, but the conclusion of all where there are some influence in grammatical and syntax in acquisition of a second language, and it is quite difficult to unite the first language and the target language. Well, in this year, we know that the most problem at a time in the context of acquisition of a second language is too what is that? Too fanatic to the first language. So it is quite difficult for the target one to apply or to adapt with the target language, because we are, or the people at a time, too fanatic to their culture or to their first language. They keep their language as the, or they keep their culture as the best one. Well, the next one is markedness and universal grammar. Friend Enkham has explained about a useful method for determining directionality of difficulty, and well known as markedness differential hypothesis. Edgeman say that unsigned items in a language would be more difficulty to understand than marked ones would be very easy to understand. Meanwhile, Rutherford used the theory of signification, expressed that there is an order in the structure of English. Marked structure is obtained more slowly than unsigned. In some research, in hypothesis, which is more prominent is linguists in general. Edgeman and friends, or linguists, were researching about the countries that acquired a second language. One of the good alternative theory, also known as competition model, which suggests not to using normal situation, phonological and syntaxis. And it is not based on formal language to acquiring the target language. Theories of excellence, universal grammatical perspective, and competition provide a more sophisticated understanding of the difficulties in learning of a second language than we had before from initial formulation of GAE, and are more in line with current CLA studies. But should we keep in mind that describing the predicting difficulties in the midst of many variables is quite difficult. Well, the next one is learner language. Constructive analysis hypothesis emphasize uh, that there are a great influence over first language in shaping the second language. In this case, the teachers or linguist is very able to understand how to adapt a second language by using the first language and the environment, and allowing the learner to use second language without stressing the structure of the language. In the late of uh, 1960, SLA began to be tested in many ways, as the first language acquisition has been studied for some time. Learner, Learners are not viewed as flawed. Imperfect language produce full of error, but as intelligent and creative beings who walk uh, through a logic process. The stage of systematic acquisition creatively act on their language environment as they find their form and function in their meaningful context. With gradual process of trial in error and hypothesis testing, the learner of theoretically success in building an approach that is close and closer to the use of the system by native speaker of the language. A number of the terms have been coined to describe perspectives that emphasize the legitimacy of the learner's second language system. There are many ways in the context of acquiring second language where many people try to adapt second language by their environment without attention with the structure or structural of the language itself. It means that people acquisition of a second language by surroundings. The, inter, the interlanguage hypothesis led to a whole new era of a second language, of a second language research, and technique present a significant breakthrough from the cycles of CAA. One of the good approach to analyze interlanguage study learning speech and writing learner is known as language learner, and it is also study about learner error in writing. Well, and the next one is error analysis. In life, we experience a lot of dynamic all the time. In this case, we know something about something because of the process of trying. In everything about trials and the journey of life, we experience many mistakes, and something that cannot be fooled that we all learn from mistakes, because from mistake we learn to achieve the goals that we are gonna live. Well, the same thing with the language acquisition inherently in acquiring the first language or a second language. There are many dynamic. It means that mistakes are inevitable and always exist in our language process, such as word error, word structure, sentence, and so on. But how do we live from mistakes and make things according to the rules? It means that learning the first and second language can be adapted because the enthusiasm, even though there are many mistakes and problems or obstacles. Well, the next one is mistakes and errors. Well, in terms of study language analysis, it is very important first to distinguish between these two things. It is the errors and mistakes. A mistake refers to the performance errors, that is either a random guess or split. In that, it is a failure to analyze a no system correctly. All people make mistakes in the first language and also second language. We can avoid mistakes. Uh, Mistake we make is because of error in pronouncing. The error that often occurs in the first and the second language is in the context of structural and syntaxis and grammar of the language itself. Uh, Other than a misspelling or because of the first language, there are two types of language: is the prescriptive language and descriptive language. People often argue between this understanding of the language that is with the rule. It is by linguist and not according to the rules, but interlocutor understanding the meaning of the conversation. Well, error, and the next one is error in error analysis. Well, the thing is often done is to pay too much attention to the make of students, even to the main irregularity that occurred was in a teacher who managed the class. In this case, it should pay more attention to improving students' ability in language and communication using a second language. Frequently, accuracies of variation kind are often required in terms of grammatical rules, especially second language, such as the formation of structures and rules. But the most important thing is to be progressive in using the language itself. To what extent? Error analysis is more on language paper in general. It means that the use of the language is in the rule is not very important, but the most important thing is ability to speak more specifically a second language. Well, this is in this point. It is tried to express that the most important thing is speak up. So by speak up, we will know, or we be able to adapt, or what is that? We will know what is the main or the rule or what we should talk. I mean, if we know about the language, we will. If we want to know about the language, so the first process is we need to speak up, and by speak up we will know the rule of the language. Well, and the next is identifying and describe errors. It is quite difficult in understanding language system in the first and second language in the context of identifying and describe errors, because it is must by comparing data. There is a mode in identifying and describe errors. The first is coding. Identify errors, misspelling of speech in the context of a language. In this case, every single word that uttered by learners analyze in terms of wideness. More on, this model explains about two patterns. Is that overt and overt errors. Overtly, more on non-compliance with the rule of the language, and covertly with comfort to be rule of the language, but not used in communication. More on this case is to describing it with combine both errors is with appropriate sentence and describe the rule, let learners know it. Well, this is actually the same what we have said in earlier, that the most important thing in this chapter is how people at a time try to identify first language and the second language, but they adapt with the second language by using effort and effort errors, which is they speak up without pay attention with the rule, and some others speak up with careful pay attention with the rules of the language. While next, source of errors. Through several ways, we can find mistakes in pronunciation in the context of error in the pronunciation of a second language. After knowing the symptoms, so that we can give the best way or give an understanding of the best way in the context of a second language acquisition. The first, interlingual transfer. This part of error analysis identifies the state translation from the original language. This error usually carries the context of the language to the second language, which make the file. And the next is interlingual transfer. In this year, learners second language based on logical theory and structure, and based on the first language too, and it is still case ambiguity. Well, and the next slide is for my partner Susana Murni.
Okay, thanks for time you and Jumi. Now explain about content learning. Context refers, for example, to the classroom with the teacher and its material in the case of the school learning, or the social situation in the case of undeveloped second language learning. And in a classroom context, the teacher of the textbook can lead the learner to make a faulty hypothesis about the language. What regards 1917 one, a false concept, and what Stanson 1917 termed introduced errors. And two vocabulary items presented contiguously, for example, point at and the point out might in later recall be confused. See context. Refers, for example, to the classroom with its teacher and its material in the case of school learning imply, because of the cognitive of presentation, or a teacher may provide incorrect information, not uncommon occurrence by a way of misleading definition, word, or grammatical generalization. Okay, communication strategies. Strategies are definite and related to learning style. Learners obviously use production strategies in order to enhance getting their message across, but at times these techniques can themselves become a source of error. Stage of learning language development. Okay, terms of first stage are based on observation of what the learner does in terms of errors alone. The first is a stage of random errors, a stage that Corder called it persistent active in which the learners is only vaguely aware that there is some systematic order to a particular class of items. And the second, or emergent, a state of learner language finds the learner growing in consistency in linguistic production. The third state is a truly systematic state in which the learner is now able to manifest a more consistency in producing the second language. A final state of which some research along 2003, for example, called stabilization is asking to award quarter 1973 a scale of post-systematic state. Okay, variation in learner language. Taroni suggested a fourth category of variation described as the gradual diffusion of incorrect terms of the first, linguistic context, psychology processing factor, and social context and language function. Okay, facilitation of stabilization. Facilitation can be seen as consistent with principles of human learning already discussed in this book. Conditioning, reinforcement, a need, motivation, and self-determination, and others. Vigil and Oller, 1776 provide a formal account of facilitation as a factor of positive and negative affective and cognitive feedback. They note that there is two kinds of information transmitted between source, learners, and audience. In the case, native speaker, information about the effective relationship between a source and audience, and cognitive information, fact, superstition, and belief. Okay, errors in the classroom. A brief history implied in all of the foregoing discussion, from interlingual research to error analysis to facilitation, is the difficulty of the bumpy and winding route that alone get learner travels in the case for proficiency. Okay, the next categories of error treatment. Okay, types of feedback. The first, recurs, an implicit type of corrective feedback that reformulate or expand an ill-formed or incomplete address in unrelated way. The second, classification request. Classification request and the elucidation of reformulation or repetition from a student. The third, metalinguistic feedback. Metalinguistic feedback provides comments, information, or question related to be available from the knowledge of the student. The fourth, elucidation. Elucidation technique prompts the learner to self-correct elucidation, and the prompts are more when in the request for electation. A correct response, and the next explicit correction, a clear indication to the student that the form incorrect and provision of correct form. The next repetition. Repetition, the teacher speaks the ill-formed part of the student and trends usually with a change in information. Thank you.
Well, everybody does not feel we are in the end of the presentation. So thank you very much for your attention and thank you very much for your watching this video. So if you have any question if you have or if you find some difficulties in understanding this topic or this chapter, just type or give your question in the box comment down here. So thank you very much. Bye bye.